Okay, our last speaker coming to the stage before lunch today is Emerson Spartz. Emerson has been hailed as the king of viral media by Forbes, and he's the founder of sites like Dose and OMG Facts, which bring in over 50 million monthly readers. He convinced his parents to let him drop out of school at age 12, which I thought was fascinating, and homeschool himself so he could build MuggleNet, which quickly became and still is the #1 Harry Potter fan site. Please welcome him to the stage.
Hey everyone, super excited to be here. So I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning of that very weird thing you just said where I, at the age of 12, convinced my parents to let me drop out of school and homeschool myself, because it requires a little bit of explanation. So yes, I'm literally a middle school dropout, totally one-upping all the college dropouts out there. Created MuggleNet about a month later. You heard MuggleNet, #1 Harry Potter site. Put a little context on that. The site was like 50 million page views a month. It was one of the largest sites in the early 2000s. We had the #1 podcast in the world, not just for Harry Potter, but for all podcasts. We had a #2 New York Times bestselling book. I found out later we were only 20 copies away from #1. Had I only known. So I just learned a ton through that experience. I learned a little bit of everything: how to write, how to code, how to edit, how to lead, how to manage, how to design. We used to go on tour and live like rock stars. It was wild. Also learned how to deal with some other things like extortion, blackmail, hackers, groupies, mutinies. I mean, literally all those things in actuality. There's lots of good stories there. Probably not all appropriate for the stage. Anyway, so aside from that, my parents pretty much, they kind of stayed out of my way and let me study whatever I wanted. But one thing they did do was they had me read 4 short biographies of successful people every day. And this just shattered my little 12-year-old brain into about 10,000 pieces. And I started thinking really big, and I decided that I wanted to change the world. And I want to do it on a massive scale. So I began further immersing myself into the lives of people who had already changed the world, see what patterns I could extract from their experiences. And in doing this research, one conclusion I came to very quickly is that people who change the world tend to be extraordinarily influential before they change the world. So I realized that influence and impact are inextricably linked, and the more influence you have, the more impact you can create. So that kind of set in motion a lifelong fascination with studying influence. And then there's one type of influence in particular which really captured my imagination, which was virality. Because to me, the ability to make things go viral felt like the closest you could get to having a human superpower. If you could make things viral, you could tip elections, you could overthrow dictators, you could start movements, you could revolutionize entire industries. And so I've been obsessed with curves that look like this my whole life. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. But first, a little bit more background on why. I'm going to show you a lot of charts, but they're great charts, I promise. So eventually I decided to go to college for fun, which is not a good reason. I got bored really fast, really predictably, and I was going to drop out and start another business. But at this point, I had already had enough success with the first business that I wanted to go really big with the next one. I wanted to identify a model that would maximize my probability of getting to $1 billion by the time I was 30. Now, I knew the odds of that happening were infinitesimally small, but I figured, maybe statistically speaking, I'll get 3-ish swings at this. So how do I maximize the probability of one of those swings connecting? So I set off on this quest, because I want to be able to connect dots and see patterns between different disciplines and industries. So I set a goal of reading 1 nonfiction book every single day until graduation. So it was business, politics, psychology, economics, technology, science, very heavy overall concentration on studying the human mind. It was studying businesses, industries, everything from natural gas wholesaling to drywall contracting. It was actually a 3-part process. So there's reading, reviewing, and rehearsing. Because it's a waste of time to learn stuff, but you can't remember it, and you can't apply it when it's relevant. So to maximize my retention, I spent the first 6 months doing a really deep dive into the neuroscience of learning and memory. Because learning how to learn is literally the most important skill you could ever learn. It's like wishing for more wishes. So I ended up building out different spaced repetition schedules where I'd review everything I wanted to remember on a schedule of a day later, a week later, a month later, and then every 6 months in perpetuity. And then the third part of the process was rehearsal. Like, how do Kobe would just go to the gym and shoot 800 jumpers a day. How do you do that with this more intellectual stuff? So I built out different frameworks to contextualize the information. So I'd have a persuasion framework, negotiation framework, innovation framework, et cetera. And when I started studying innovation, that was when a lot of ideas started to come. Because there's patterns that come up over and over and over again with businesses. And I had a lot of billion-dollar ideas. And I was like, OK, well, which actually has the highest probability of becoming a billion-dollar business? And I started to get really obsessed with this notion of probability of success. And the obsession with viral potential and probability of success kind of came together, and that's what led to a series of aha moments, which led to me creating what the company is now. So fast forwarding to present day, the company is called Dose. We've raised about 35 million. We have one of the largest audiences of any media company in the world. Best way to probably understand us as simply as possible. Think of us as similar to BuzzFeed, but targeting a younger audience and with more of a focus on tech. So of those patterns, though, the ones that get me the most excited are curves like this, like we talked about. And the reason why is because, okay, so backing up just a little bit. So the first thing, I developed a series of algorithms designed to get Facebook pages to go viral, created dozens of Facebook pages that went from 0 to millions of fans over a period of a few hours to a few days. So massively viral. And what I was basically doing is I was just testing hundreds of different variables and seeing which variables correlated positively to virality. And then I kept shortening the viral loop until I could tell within 20 seconds if a page was going to go viral. It was super fun. Ended up building up an audience of tens of millions of followers on every major social platform. And then started launching websites. And we had one of the largest meme site networks, like funny iPhone autocorrects, all that kind of stuff that you've seen pop up in your social feeds. A lot of that was us. Okay, so getting more to so you get the general like nerdy grit behind what I'm going to show you again, these charts. So like I said, I love charts like this so much that I spend a lot of time thinking about exponential trends. I also you're going to see I cheat a little bit with these trends because they're not all exponential in media, but they're still cool, I promise. So the way that I kind of find a lot of these trends is I go into Google Correlate. This is one of my favorite tools. If you go into Google, if you guys haven't heard of it, there's this thing called Google Correlate. Basically, it's like Google Trends, but Google shows you correlations between search terms, which is amazing because you can just like sit there and play around all day with like, I wonder what other interesting correlations there are. So you can actually like draw curves too. So you can actually like draw an exponential growth curve, and you can see what are the Google search results that fit that curve ideally. So you just sit there and draw curve after curve after curve, and you keep seeing different exponential trends. So I've come across a lot of really interesting ones that weren't intuitive to me. So I'm going to talk about those now. Okay, so I'm going to go through these actually like really quickly. But you'll get the flavor of what I'm talking about. Okay, so first exponential trend is in 3D content, right? This one's pretty straightforward. VR shipments, again, probably not wildly surprising. Movies. Movies is another one that, again, so we come back to these overall exponential trends, right? The barriers to entry are crashing down. It costs exponentially less money to do almost anything that you're interested in doing now as it relates to content. And this is something we see on the front lines. So at the very core of what we do is most media companies create content and pray. We also create content and pray, and then we optimize the shit out of it. Because we know that that's at the core of what, when you're talking about virality, at the core of what makes something viral, something that just deeply resonates on a level that most content doesn't do, right? Because think about what virality is, right? Why do people share? Well, there's two basic reasons why people share content. They share because it makes them feel all the feels, right? It like triggers all these emotions, like very powerful emotions. Positive emotions tend to work better than negative emotions. Things like humor, nostalgia, cute animals, things like that. We all know that. Those are really straightforward ones, right? Also, anger works really well because anger gets your blood boiling and makes you want to take action, right? This is the reason why you go onto the front page of Reddit any day and you see an article about Comcast, you know that you're supposed to upvote it because fuck Comcast. So that's the first reason why people share is because all the feels, right? So I like to think about virality like a thermometer. Where you have to like think of like a fundraising thermometer. You got to get to our goals, but instead of raising $100,000, we have to raise like that much emotion. And it's pretty rare for a piece of content to actually create that much emotion. Usually people just get lucky when it spreads, but there are ways of actually just optimizing into it. Because also the beautiful thing about virality is that even tiny little changes can have a huge impact on performance. Okay, so that's the first reason is that emotion. The second reason is we share things because we want to look cool. This is the reason why nobody shares porn. This is the reason why people are much more likely to share things from the New Yorker or Harvard Business Review, even if it's really boring and we didn't read it, because it makes us look really smart, right? Actually, a really interesting study from Chartbeat showed that only 25% of people who shared an article scrolled. I'm going to stop for a minute and let that sink in, because that's amazing. Has the amazingness of that stat just kind of bathed over you yet? That means nobody was reading this stuff at all. This is mostly business content because it was coming from Chartbeat, I assume. Like our content, we know. Like if someone doesn't get to the bottom of our 30-item list, then they definitely weren't going to share it. But I just think that's amazing. It just demonstrates how much of this is identity. We want to project a version of ourselves out to the world that's smart, that's sophisticated. I'm an upstanding public citizen who cares about what's going on in other parts of the world. So just some really interesting trends and happenings there. Another kind of really interesting trend is that social has become this game changer for performance. If you think about like the brand marketing world versus like the direct response world, one was all about like full funnel optimization, but the brands were more just like, we sprinkle our money far and wide and we hope that it works. And social is making it possible to like measure performance in a way that was never possible before. And then, like, for example, Facebook gives you things like, you can look at the retention curve and where people abandon a video, and you can just hack that and make sure that you have a video people don't abandon. So there's a bunch of cool things like that are happening. But I digress. Okay, so movies, words. This one's cool, right? The amount of words that are being created is also growing. at an extremely fast pace because we're finding that there's all these gaps in the English language that we didn't know existed. And the internet's amazing. Like there's this YouTube channel that just like creates new words, and every once in a while they catch. Songs. So this one I think is interesting because it also demonstrates that the music industry is dying, right? There's no money in music. Well, what's interesting about this, my belief is that the reason why the amount of songs being created is still growing exponentially is because more people can create music without needing to do it professionally. You don't have to like make your entire living out of music because there's all these tools and technologies, and you can just have a YouTube channel and record yourself playing guitar, and you make $100 a month off that, and you're pretty happy because you just love music, right? So it's a passion industry. Social media innovation. This chart shows the growth in patents relating to social networking. This is something we're seeing on the front lines where the cycle time in our industry is so fast. Oh my God. I feel like we come up with some brilliant new strategy. It's not usually a strategy, it's like a tactic. And then it works for like 3 months. And then everyone else figures it out, and then bam, we're on to the next thing. So it is happening quickly here. Facebook users, obviously, trends in media. Facebook, people like to hate on Facebook with respect to like Facebook isn't the cool new thing anymore. But you see that number there that says 1,600? That means 1.6 billion users. Facebook, that's like everyone with an internet connection, basically. So I still get asked, I'm like, oh, but this group of users doesn't use Facebook. I'm like, really? 1.6 billion users, right? You know how many English speakers are in the world, or people are in the world who have internet? Snapchat users, again, I'm sure you've seen plenty of charts like this, so I won't linger. But this is the changing face of media, right? It's the platforms. The platforms are the new power brokers. Also, interestingly, as we think about Facebook real quick, so this is another interesting trend. Websites in general, so think about like how I'm a publisher, right? 50 million monthly unique visitors. What does that really mean? Because I reach I get 1.5 billion Facebook feed impressions a month. And I know that my content reaches 200 million people a month on Facebook and Instagram and so on. So what does the 50 million unique visitors come back to the website? What does that really mean? Well, it's going to mean less and less, because Facebook and Google are very obviously, if you read between the lines of what they're saying, they don't want to send people away from their platforms. They want to own the audience, right? Now, they didn't have the power in the past to be able to stop that from happening, but now they do. I mean, go Google anything with your flights, your hotels. Google's not putting all that stuff right in the search results. And Facebook's been very clear about not wanting to send people away, right? You've been hearing all this news about publishers' traffic getting hit and so on. So that means a lot of publishers who are dependent on like people come to my website and I sell advertisements to them, those guys are in a lot of trouble. So that's an interesting trend. Remember, Facebook and Google are like 80% of most publishers' web traffic. So if Facebook and Google turn off the spigot to traffic to websites, that's a big, big, big deal. That's going to completely transform the landscape of the publishing world. Photos shared. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of charts like this, but it's worth keeping in mind. Everyone's a content creator now, right? Instagram users. Woo. OK, things connected to the internet. The one thing here, I'm sure you guys have seen charts like this, but one of my favorite quotes is that connecting products to the internet will be the 21st century electrification. That was a quote from Matt Berg from Future Crimes. But if you haven't read Future Crimes, you guys should. Future Crimes is like this amazing book showing how all these exponential trends are going to impact things kind of in a negative way, but it's not written by, anyway, it's a really good book. The two things here I want to draw attention to, smart home security and smart home energy. These are like the big two of Internet of Things that we're going to see. The Internet of Things can be really vague and broad and like sounds cool to have products connect to the internet, but these are the two main categories. Debt, presented without comment. I'll leave that to the economists. By the way, as I'm going through these things, I haven't tested any of these. I have no idea if anyone else finds these interesting. Normally, I give this talk about the science of virality, and I've basically tested the shit out of that talk because I know when people laugh and what they respond to, what resonates, and so on. But I haven't done this at all. So if you tweet at me which of these slides you resonate, then I can make this way better, which would be great. So algorithms also presented without comment. Basically, if you guys haven't picked this up by now, you guys have heard like Flash Boys and things like that. But like the markets now are basically all robots trading with each other. It's easy to miss that. We talk about high-frequency trading. It sounds like this nefarious, black box stuff that like evil companies do, but really it bears like stopping to pause for a second and realize this means 85% of all market volume trading is algorithmic. The robots have taken over that industry. Startups coming from accelerators. Thought this was interesting too. Lines of code, bugs, and open source projects. These things are all correlated. The amount of lines of code being created is growing exponentially. The amount of bugs, therefore, that are being created is also growing exponentially, which means the amount of security exploits and vulnerabilities itself is growing exponentially. And then open source software projects. That is also growing exponentially, the amount of open source projects. Drone shipments. Drone patents. Online courses. It's been fun to talk about how the death of the MOOCs and so on, because there's been a bit of an overhyped initial period here, but it does bear stopping to think about the fact that the amount of classes for online education is itself still growing exponentially. Planets discovered. This is a cool one. I told you I was getting away from media, but come on, this is how interesting is this? Think of this curve. This is just 1 year's curve, but like imagine this in 10 years as these exponential trends keep accelerating. Like how many more planets are we going to find? And what kinds of amazing things are we going to find in those planets? Books. Books are dead. No, books aren't dead. Books per year, like I still read about half a book a day, and I'm now definitely all into e-readers. But everyone wants to write a book, still, even though there's all kinds of other things competing for our attention now. That's also one thing I think is interesting. I actually have this huge list of several hundred things. I started this about 6 months ago. I started just writing down everything that I think is exponential, that most people don't think of as exponential. I can only cover like 30 here. But one of those things I think is interesting is the value of attention is itself growing exponentially. I couldn't find a curve for this because it doesn't really make sense. Think about it like this. So if everything is growing exponentially, but the attention you have is still 24 hours in a day, that means that anything that can capture your attention itself becomes exponentially more valuable. So one of the greatest skill sets you can have is the ability to capture attention. That skill set, the ability to capture attention itself, is growing exponentially in value, which is why I'm all about virality, right? Capturing attention. It's kind of a self-serving conclusion, but I like it. Collaboration, authorship over time. So this just shows the average number of authors per paper of scientific papers. And my theory about why this is true is that, one, you just come up with way better stuff when you collaborate, which is kind of obvious. But also, it's just harder for one lone mad scientist in a lab to actually create something of significant value anymore, because we've already kind of like plucked the low-hanging fruit that a single guy in a lab can actually uncover. So now you need to have teams of 3, 5, 10 people that are working together on a project to actually create new science. Memes. Hey, memes aren't dead, right? Maybe some of the memes have changed form, but like memes themselves are still growing exponentially. User-generated video. This is just hours of footage uploaded to YouTube per minute over time. Kind of an amazing stat when you think about it. Crowdsourcing. This chart just goes crowdsourcing mentions in government bids, RFPs, and awards. We created like 30 different websites, all of which created millions of monthly unique visitors, and it was all crowdsourced content. Copyrights. This one's interesting because copyright law is getting, I would argue, exponentially less relevant in a world that the internet's a giant copy machine. And when your content gets copied, it's like the greatest vote of confidence that your content actually worked, it resonated. And so the idea that like the amount of copyrights is going up is creating tension, which manifests in the form of copyright battles. The amount of copyright battles itself is also increasing exponentially. DMCA claims, et cetera, et cetera. So you think about how slowly the law changes compared to like how much content, how much innovation, how much remixing is actually going on with content now. It's kind of amazing to think about like content's doing this in almost every category, and the law is like doing this. So the delta between like what the law can answer and what's actually happening with content is getting to a point of like complete absurdity. Bike lanes. This is just newspaper items mentioning protected bike lanes, separated bike lanes, cycle track by year. Guns. What? This one's, I just stumbled across this, thought it was really cool. This is the number of the government agency that does guns. This is how many forms they process by fiscal year. So you can see here 2005, 41,000 guns registered. 2015, 308,000. That's creepy, right? Malware. Malware is also hockey sticking. All these categories: ransomware, malware. The ease at which like criminals can rob people is itself growing exponentially. Think about this. It used to be that if you were a robber, you like go rob one person at a time. Like, here, give me your money. They pull out their wallet and give it to you. And then like trains came about, and then it was like, okay, everyone on this train, give me your money. And now, I mean, did you guys hear about the billion like hack? I mean, they hacked 1 billion credit cards in one fell swoop. Target with 100 million. So the amount of people that some person can rob has itself grown exponentially. Also kind of scary. Humans and extinctions, almost perfectly correlated. The amount of extinctions happening in the world is growing exponentially. Human population is also growing exponentially. The amount of scientific studies being published is growing exponentially. That's cool. Yay us, go science. The amount of TV shows being commissioned and produced is growing exponentially. App downloads growing exponentially. This is App Store. App activity. This is just events on Android and iOS. Apps available growing exponentially. Everyone can create an app now. Tools are getting easier and easier for anyone to do it. The amount of knowledge. This is the number of articles on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is also not dead. This is also kind of empowering you to think about how much knowledge we're actually creating as a society now. The amount of video games. This is video games registered on Video Game Geek. Again, barriers to entry crashing down. Less and less people, more and more people can make video games. Esports growing exponentially. For those of you who don't know, esports, video game sports. Esports, I would argue, is the future of sports. Because esports themselves are growing in addictiveness exponentially. Because instead of like regular sports, which basically never change, they are every week these big games push out patches just to make the games more addicting. Which means that like one industry is doing this, the other industry is doing this. So I think sports are kind of doomed. I played sports my whole life growing up, so that saddens me, but esports are growing exponentially for a reason. And for those of you who don't know, esports now has gotten so big that more people watch the Season 3 League of Legends World Championship than the NBA Finals and the World Series combined. And they are packing stadiums now, like football stadiums for just a bunch of nerds on computers. And then if you see the picture in the bottom left over here, the girl. So that girl is actually my wife, Gabby, who is actually a professional, also self-serving conclusion on the future of esports. She's actually a professional esports commentator. She does play-by-play commentary, and she has like a big following on Twitch, which is like the ESPN of esports. But mostly, I just want to put this slide in there to show off how cute she is, because I totally hit the jackpot. Thanks, everyone.